Good morning. Good day. Good after. Good noon. Good eve. Good night. Goodly. Good me. Good you. Hi, I'm Elliot. And we're sharing my morning in your insert label lapel. I make myself laugh so easily and stupidly. Whatever, wherever the sun is in your sky.
It's not what's going on. It's not.
Well, then, imagine your sky's underneath you. Oh, thank goodness that weird is the closest thing to actual, huh? Phew. I'm going to share with you a little bit at present. An important query while the sun hides behind the trees during my morning coffee and sun salutation. This ascension journey is a thing. And I myself have been starkly on it since around this time last year. And then my whole life. But why I say around this time last year, and if I want to be more specific about this kind of topic, whatever, I would say around May, June of 2018 is when I was first introduced to these concepts of 3D, 4D, 5D, not ever, because I'm like a knowledge whore and proud in that I'm always listening. And that's actually a perfect little seg. Why? I don't know. When I did, I think my actual first in earnesty introduction to this concept of D's nuts, yo. Oh man, if you're still here, yes, I'm more or less a comedy show of epoch proportions. Around, I think I was about 21. So it was about 13 years ago. And I had attracted this opportunity to do a certification course, like a 6-7 month certification course at the National Institute of Broadcasting which is like the Made in Canada beef company. Remember when McDonald's, I don't know if you watch TV or whatever, and I don't watch TV that has commercials, and I haven't for a long time. And even when it was around, I was the guy. I've always felt the disturbance and the malicious intent of commercials my whole life. But way back whenever, they were like, I'm Canadian, and they would do like, in order to, endear us to the reality of their meat, they would do these like promos, these like, the heart touchers. I raised steer. And then little Made in Canada stamp. What's that? Well, they say it's made in Canada. Real 100% beef. I think that was it. It's like 100% Canadian beef or something like that. It's like 100% Canadian beef. That must be real. But they're not allowed to lie. There are rules and laws, policies, polices that prevent them from doing that. And I trust that because my life is so super. Wait, hold on a second. I've got to go to work doing something I hate, only to come home to the family that I'm not allowed to spend time with because I have to work and eat shit I don't want to, like McDonald's, and then drink or smoke myself stupid, go to bed, do it all over again. But I'm free. 100% beef for real. The company was registered as 100% Canadian beef. So they could lie on their commercials. They're like, I'm not lying. It's the company, yo. Where's the beef made? In the company. And really, we're not even really talking about beef. We're talking about their name. So that's honesty. Fuckers. In that way, the National Institute of Broadcasting was a name. Anyways, Jim Carrey went to it. And I don't know, other people. And it cost me if you want to know abuse, really. But that's a story for a more personal nature. And it was lovely. It gave me confidence. It was the first time in my my young adult man life, which is fucked. That's been alive for about 21 years. 20, 21, 22, 20, something 19, something 20, maybe, probably around 20 actually. Where they're like, Elliot, you have the money voice. I was like, yeah? Sick. Because everyone always tells me that I have this great voice. But it never gets me anywhere. And people still treat me like shit. So it was a little external validation that was really kind, actually. And helped me grow in my own self-esteem, of which I don't think I really came into until I found yoga and started teaching it, which, interestingly enough, that same National Institute of Broadcasting was in a building, and across the hall, it was like just a 2 units, and across the hall was this like humid, steamy little yoga studio called Moksha Hot Yoga. And this is probably about 7, 6, 8 years before I had even done yoga, pardon me, for the first time myself. And I remember walking in and kind of being, like, looking in and like seeing these like scantily clad, beautiful people, being like, hippies? That's my confused confusion. Anyways, I love how it was like pretty on point until this divergence. But good adventures, are circuitous. And like the broadcasting course and hot yoga, it all comes back around, so you don't have to worry about it. Anyways, I was introduced to the law of one by the raw material from a student there. And this was the first time in my life, in my own like self-education, that I'd come across this concept of channeling and otherworldly beings that had substance, something to believe in, because I was resonating a kind of truth in me that I hadn't like was thirsty for, and it was stating something. Around this time was also that I was introduced to, I think, Zeitgeist, which is, if you don't know, Zeitgeist is a word, the German, that is similar to the word paradigm, or it's a combination, I'd say, maybe of like paradigm and like cultural logos. Anyways, it's a documentary about the paradigm shift in a most altruistically attempting external expression. And I found that also very inspiring. It introduced me to the concept of resource-based economy, which I have since, in my own esteem, humbly mastered conceptually, theoretically, and reasonably to the point of deployment when the need not arises, because need's fucking here, but when the world asks for it enough, when the world asks for it at all. Because this medium, it's part of like my own kind of trouble, issue, challenge with it is questions of the stuff of legend, questions of the stuff of higher, lower, and right here learning. And there's how do I really appropriately say anything when I can't hear you. Now, I've since learned to listen beyond my ears and beyond time. But anyways, it's like I say that and then I get I like listen to one of you, likely more than one of you, and then but because it's kind of still kind of like ineffable and staticky, I'm like, what? And then I'm like, what did I just say? And then so I'll ask you, what was I talking about? And then one of you just fucking bring me back on course, please. Thank you. So I've been rereading the raw material in like a really self-comforting, self-loving kind of way for about 16 years, 15 years, I don't know. Since I was 18, when I stopped going to high school and I started teaching myself, I devour information, especially when it tickles my fancy, and I'm ticklish. Fancy. So the raw material, if you're unfamiliar, is channeled information by a group of, I think it's like 3 people, very much at least 2, like the questioner and the channel, and then that's not including the entity, the social memory complex that is Ra. And they were channeled in 81, or 81 through, I don't remember, for a few years, and they amount to about 4 books, 4 or 5. And in my own kind of absorption of that information, I read it like here, then there, then there, then there, then there, not linearly, as far as, or rather not sequentially, as far as like how you would read a book normally. And why I also think that's kind of funny is there's like a realm of books such as that, such as in just like pertinent to my own passionate research and less my commitment to like read a book. So of like the hundreds of books that I've read, high hundreds, I want to say like thousands, but that sounds ridiculous. But it's high hundreds. I'd say like a solid 3/5 I've read 4/5 of. Yeah, it's like you read it. It's like it starts to like summarize, or sometimes the author like takes the liberty at that point of the book to be like, so that's like the stuff, and then here's kind of what I think, and I'm like, and you lost me. Slash is like, well, this is what I think, and then next book. Anyways, so I've been reading it therapeutically, and soul led, because I resonate deeply with the law of one and Ra, if you can't tell, sun, love. And it's fucking great stuff. There are some things that I have, like the Emerald Tablets of Souls, I've listened to. Like there's a really great version of it, great for me anyways, version of it on YouTube. I think the channel is Spoken Scriptures. I love her voice. I don't know, like she's me. I love her very much. And by virtue of the amount of times that I've listened to that audiobook, and I think it's a little over 2 hours. I've read, and thus they kind of like listen to her voice, thousands of hours. Like, no, let's be a little realistic. Let's like guess. If I like, you guess, not thousands. Maybe I'm being like just that makes no sense. How many times do you think I've listened to that? How many times have you ever listened to one story? I would put it at least in the ballpark of 500 times, which puts it in the realm of, I'd say, 1,300 hours. And every time you hear something that sounds the same, like it's repeating itself, but you listen to it like it's the first time, you hear yourself anew. I couldn't tell you how many, like if I've spent 1,300 hours, and when I say that number, it actually sounds too small. But if I'd spent that much time listening to that book, the scriptures really, then I would say that I've learned like 26,000 different little most important things. And I keep learning. The easy way to interpret that is we change over time. And so every time you listen to it, you're a different person. Every time you read something, you're reading it with a kind of new lens, a new awareness. Also, the divine speaks to us through each other, speaks to us through the projections of a reality, and through loving intuition, teases our attention towards those mediums and channels that will most clearly convey the sounds, the tones, the imagery, the emotions that are most synchronous with your most divine and so divinely sought out like sole purpose. So now, like the broccoli and potatoes of the share today, which is, if you know me, never comes right off the hop. Because what I provide is dangerous information. Dangerous for the uninitiated believing that they understand what I mean. You'll never, well, I don't, not never, but it's not so intentional. And part of it is my own practice. I've taught stupid amounts of hours of yoga classes and workshops and things like that. So I myself have this internal like storytelling rhythm that matches, you know, the 60-minute class, the 75-minute class, the 90-minute class. And so my own process of teach learning kind of chiseling my own self-concept with us, the students, follows a curve. The length of the song. And so I'm curious, it's probably about half. Yeah, see, right? Yeah, it's probably about now, about half an hour, where I have prefaced what I mean in other words. It's not average or typical, but since we're talking, it can seem, and I say this, it can, because it can seem even to myself, especially in at times when I've been less secure about my own process and knowing and like divine expertise, you know, that it's like, Elliot, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I thought we were going to talk about 4D and like blah, 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 you know, and now you're talking about your past and this and that. And like, do you even know what you're talking about? And it's to these types of people. And I am reclaiming judgment because well, whatever, if you're still here, you get to hear this. It's the Bible, different holy scriptures. It's like it expresses, it's like, it's not for God to judge. Or even like, in so many words, God has channeled that truth. It's in that like, God doesn't judge. But if God doesn't judge, and no one judges, then there ye be no judgment. And if there ye be no judgment, there be no decision, no evaluation, no choice. So in reclaiming judgment, because fairly, what people have called judgment in the past is really just personal irresponsibility. it's like, it's not good to judge people. No, it's not good to be personally irresponsible with your emotions. When we blame other people for the way that we feel in terms of judgment, that's not judgment. It's not rational. It's not loving. And my judgment of such is that's okay. My judgment is as such that there's no blame to fall for anyone being themselves, however good or bad they seem to be at it in comparison to whoever. But mine isn't so big, but it's like Caribbean. I said, okay, you agree with me. Good. Going back to my judgment. What was I judging? Oh, yeah. It's not my practice on this platform, and I truly hold no judgment for others and their expertise on this platform. I'm not speaking arbitrarily, or rather generally, or in all-inclusively or whatever. I'm really speaking of my own personal productivities and preference and like strengths and challenges. But short form, like content, it's not really my style. Can you tell? Elliot, do you ever shut up? I actually spend most of my time not talking. And in friendship, I typically spend most of my time also listening. The best of my friendships, though, I couldn't tell you because no one's counting. Why the long face? I was just counting how many of those friendships exist. And it started off a little bit like, woo woo, but I'm being kind and I'm lifting my own the perfect word is escaping me, but I want to say like self-deservingness of recognition of the good that I actually do have a goodly amount of friends that are that good. What I'm realizing is actually just my definition, and it's like the cultural definition of friends is so skewed and fucked up that I'm like, well, do I have any friends? It's like, well, not by the sitcoms definition, but do I have actually many people that I would call friend and would call me friend? I have a fuck ton. And I'm talking about the good ones that I like a lot. My inner circle is a dot, but I have a lot of, but outer circle is a fucking Jackson Pollock painting. And everything that I've been saying so far has been teaching the subtleties of this confused layer of perception that is actually ubiquitous in this world global ascension community. And then I'm going to go ahead and call it what's becoming an industry, because that is the decadent, if by that I could mean decayed or like decayent social structures that we've been born through and are passing, or have passed actually, depending on your perception, is that act of like commodifying everything by virtue of placing value on a valueless concept, and then asserting that that concept be the representative of value as opposed to the actual, which is to say, when we think in terms of what we desire, we give it a price tag. When we think of what is possible, we think of the monetary cost. And it's always been so downright ignorant to me. And I don't mean that in the like, yous don't like black people? Yous ignorant. That was multivalent in my expression. You appreciate that? I really just mean like the ignoring person is an ignorant or ignorant. That nothing costs money. Nothing costs gold. This is a topic for another share, but we're having a conversation. And this is a thought that occurred to me yesterday. Not for like the first time, but framed as such for the first time, because that's how I see it. Like, how long and deeply do you have to think about this to believe it? Like, before we were using cash, remember cash? When we used to like pay for things with that stuff, paper and coins or whatever. Tap. That's the Visa thing. I know that in Toronto, at least, every like credit and debit cards up to 100, you just tap at this point. But I've traveled around, and that's not as like everywhere as I would believe if my only experience was Torontonian. Anyways, I'm going to give you, in your imagination, like a big old rock of gold. Do you have it? Place it in the imagination of your hand. What does it feel like? You can, in the imagination of your hand, imagine its differences between other kind of like metallic materials. what it's not like. Now, imagine that there's no selling it. What can you do with it in like 2019? What can you do with it without exchanging any money? I'll leave the rest of like the parameters up to you. Now, go back to, I don't know, what's the lie? Like 1300 BC, BCE. What can you do with it? Make it silver, copper, tin, whatever. Not a whole lot, right? I mean, you can't eat it. You can't fuck it. And the only way that it can make you smile is like sunlight or a flower. Because it's beautiful to behold. Like everything can be. So why do people think that the solution to a corrupt monetary system is to go back to when we placed our value in real things like gold and silver? Like, how long and deeply do you have to think about that to stop thinking about it at such an insufficiently satisfying place? Fiat currency is currency that only has value because it only has the value that we like place in it. That's why the dollar bill, as a part of its like psychological rescripting, has "in God we trust" in it. At once to be like, trust this because it's got God in it, and then also like trust our concept of God. Give the power of your believing to this, so that we can manipulate this thing and thusly manipulate you. Gold, coins, all of that bullshit. Never mind the lie of our history of it. What value does any of that have except for the value that we give to it? So, in the commodification of spirituality and self-realization, so as to bring it to the unrealized, or rather the unrealizing. Because if if you caught the subtlety of what I mean, then you know what I mean. And if you didn't, then don't worry about it. this world, this like 3D paradigm that everybody loves to hate. And I'm speaking generally, like not everybody, obviously, but I'm so fucking specific sometimes, slash all the time, that it's glorious to be lazy. People use it so fucking flippantly. Oh, it's like we're in the 3D. Can't wait till we get to 5D. I'm in the 5D. We're building the 5D. I just want to leave the 3D and be in the 5D. But nobody, not nobody, but the way that it's used so irresponsibly, and I really mean that specifically, and the like erroneous response of it without consideration to the completeness of what's such a complex and spiritually presently pertinent concept has and is. I hear a lot of talk about 3D. I hear a lot of talk about 5D. What happened to 4, guys? Are we just like not like too cool for 4? We don't do even? Just odd? Hey man, I'm left-handed. I jive with that. Even if it's an ism. Oh, the sun is so loving and generous and effortful. To feel beholden by the golden is a gift for each of us. We only need to upturn our eyes and give of our time freely and so generously. Gift exchange. That's actually the true monad, money. I always aim by practice, then by sensible intention, that the feeling of and like the emotion of or rather the objective, the goal emotion of the knowledge information that I'm wishing to share is and could be felt through this transmission if I were to exclude the like the details. And so I'm just noticing today how significant that is, at least with this transmission. Because I've always been a spiritually inclined person, although I wouldn't have called myself that ever. Except, never mind. I just, don't believe things that, I only believe things in things so much that I can know them from my own experience. And as such, they have only as much power or influence over me so as to be reasonably related to that. So I grew up Catholic, and I started questioning religion from as early as my first communion. There was a period of time when I was a teenager where I wouldn't say I was an atheist, because that just seems like such a fucking lazy viewpoint. But I definitely went with it. There was a time where I denied the existence of God. And I'm a very physical person. I'm very third dimensional. I've got Jupiter in my third house. The third house is the house of communication. But what is communication except the conveyance of data? If I were to infuse data with divinity, it's the sort of knowing that is the complement to the ninth house of like travel, going, and higher learning. As in like almost like removed from the beginning. The third house is like, all right, but how? Right? Like, what's it made of? How's it tick? How's it talk? See what I did there? And my third house is also Aquarius. Which is especially relevant, obviously, at this time. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. And my Uranus is in my first house. Which, if you could actually just gather, and I'll give you a moment to guess, not arbitrarily, or even better, actually guess how the fuck you want. But if my third house is Aquarius, what's my first house? Knowing that houses are not all created equal in size and measure. Sagittarius. And my first house of external representation, self-representation as externally self-perceived. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. And my Uranus, and it's like, I think Jupiter is like, I think 16 degrees, 14 degrees. I can't remember which. And Uranus is 15 degrees. So they're sextile one another, which is one of the kind of benefic aspects in astrology. You can think of it like conjunctions are one, the body of influences are conjunct each other. It's kind of like they get along so well and it's so easy, like say they're friends, that they don't even realize that it's easy. And because of that, their opportunities are to identify the effort of the relationship, you know? Conjunct is like brother and sister. Like you love each other, but how could you not? Whereas sextile are like friends, even like best friends, in that they get along easily. And it's not like one is more getting along than the other, the friends or the family. But in recognizing, it's like, instead of just being like, oh, I love you because we're family, it's like recognizing it takes a little bit of that recognition to employ the benefit of that aspect. But in doing so, it's less accessible and in relationship to that, almost like a more potent. It's like marriage a little bit. It's like because you know what you have. Because you found it. Even if it was always there. Elliot, why are you sharing? Ask yourself that, if you're asking. But I reckon at this point, you know, and I love that about you. Thank you. It puts me at ease, can you tell? It's really nice. I appreciate it. I've come at everything from, I want to say the ground up, but I fucking mean like the atom up, or the all down. I know God. I know divinity. I know what I'm fucking talking about. And there's more than one way of that knowing, and to come by that knowing. and what could be superficially confused as my intellect is truly grounded in my judgment of intellect, which is a testing of what you know. I'm just noticing a hello. Oh, hey, Kay. Not right now. This is not a tarot, unless, actually, you know what? Yes, you can always ask a question. But if you're asking for a tarot reading, I'm not doing that right now. But if you're asking like a general question about tarot at all, then it'll probably have something to do with this stream. I'll let you suss, and I'm going to actually just wrap up what I'm saying and position myself so I can still be in the sun. Oh, yeah. "4D, the fourth dimension, is what we call the astral. Every dimension is at once its own like primacy. So like second dimension, two second dimensional entities is like their third dimension, is what I kind of mean. But that can be confusing, even as I'm saying it, so don't worry about that. I just want to convey that the third dimension is the first dimension of consciousness of self. And I want to say consciousness of self as consciousness, because I maintain my dog is self-aware. But as a dog and not as consciousness. The fifth dimension, like heavily prescribed, is like a pattern, like a part of the process where consciousness is undivided. Or rather, less divided in density than the third dimension, but it's more divided, it's more individuated in density than the sixth dimension. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about all the dimensions. I want to stick to the fourth, the fifth, and the third. Between the third dimension and the fifth dimension is the fourth. Astral is like the dimension of where consciousness has separated itself enough that like the motes of air the very etheric medium takes on a substantiality of consciousness. I'm going to use dimensions and densities, not interchangeably, but similarly, because conversation, and it's part of what I'm expressing. People think that we live in the third dimension right now, and that we're going from the third to the fifth. And so I ask, why aren't we going from the third to the fourth? And if that's not a question that people are asking, the same people need to ask, why not? Because ascension and descension, this paradigm shift, is all about asking yourself questions and looking within, further like capitulating answers, and thusly better questions. I've watched other tarot readers, I still do, although I'm really only watching more or less one now. I've spent actually thousands of hours on YouTube, but kitten videos amount to like 0. It's all learning. It's all learning. So I'm learning from people. I'm getting answers through the channel of other people's experiences and education. But my questions are my own, my answers become my own, and they form myself into more questions that are more refined, closer to a truth of a reality that I can create that makes sense to me. Because if you have no context, like, how do you build a Lego castle without Lego? Why are we going from the third dimension to the fifth? It's because we're not. We're going from the fourth to the fifth. The reason that people are so grounded in the third has a lot to do with the higher orders of power, that like the ranks and basically like the spiritually social hierarchies that have allowed and created for things like the archons and these other like worldly personalities that are us, all like just like creating life, as it were, experience, you know? In order to keep us down, they essentially, what we call third dimension isn't even third dimension, it's even fourth. It's second. Second dimension in realm of consciousness is instinctual. And the educational, like malefic hierarchy that is like the social manipulation aims at convincing us that what we call emotional mastery, what we call being in touch with our emotions, is actually just fighting with our instincts, or claiming our instincts as intuition or discernment, when really everything, like life demands that. consciousness, self-consciousness itself demands that. Beyond instinct. In the fourth dimension, bodies, as it were, are less dense. But they're just as real. And in the nature of the way that we conceptualize the patterning of dimensions, like the even ones, second, fourth, sixth, they are like connecting dimensions. They've got less less distinction as themselves, and more a multitude of valences within itself, so as to connect the significantly different dimensions. So the first dimension of like the elements, and the third dimension of consciousness, like self-aware as such. What the fuck is like fire deciding what to do, you know? All fire is fire. What fire's like? What's in between? We place the mineral, the plants, the animal kingdoms. Right? Notice how the elemental realm dimension is pretty succinct in its compactedness. But in the second, it's like animal, plant, mineral, and then within each of those, there's layers of consciousness within those opportunities for parameters to like bridge with themselves, but also so as to create like a framework or a webwork for the third dimension, where our density can be expressed out of what is second dimensional and become something wholly different than the first. The third dimension doesn't have that same like plants and minerals, and then within the world, it's like humans. It's like, yeah, you're stupid, not stupid. The sixth dimension is what I consider like the dimension of like sacred geometric form. And what it bridges is the seventh and the fifth. What I call the seventh, or regards the seventh, is like the realm of sound. If the eighth is light, and the ninth is night. Waveforms, creating relationship with itself, gives way to all this, the geometric forms of infinity. And in all those forms, which is less hierarchical and more diffuse, the sacred geometric forms in and of themselves start to self-organize or clump together and become something more than what they were as forms. A denser representation by virtue of their resonance, the fifth dimension. The fourth is between the third and the fifth. It's a realm of the invisible. Not there, but in there. And between 1 and 9, we'll say, like 4 is damn well close to the center, or at least farthest from 1 and 9, if 4, 5, 6 are the middle. And so it's this dimensional realm of existence open to almost more than any other realm, kind of all. It's like almost like anything and everything is possible. That's why what we do doesn't matter. The world, the buildings, all that shit, like all our great plans, like all the planning, create a business plan, like all that bullshit isn't real. Nothing is created in the third dimension like that. Which is why the fourth dimension is the realm, like the astral realm is basically the home, or has been like the home base of like the ephemeral entities that have been subjugating by abuse of like the orders of like the hierarchical orders of power influence relationship. From the fourth, manipulating the third by keeping the third down, not by identifying it as the third. Because if you did that, you'd come to the edge of the third. And then you'd be like, we're touching something else. And they'd be like, we don't want you knocking on the door. In fact, anybody that does, we're going to try and kill. Or at least make one of us. So this great dissonant transition of our planet, of our people, our galaxy, and because of the way we've kicked so much ass, which is partly due because of how much we've had our asses kicked. The universe has really kind of taken notice of this and been like, wow, you guys are fucking awesome. We could all learn from this. Because the call and the rhythm of the universe scaled down towards us or up is as such that it's time where for our rhythm, our harmony is bringing us within that greater song. And our role is as a fourth like density, and I'm not now I'm creating a little bit of distinction, but just for your mind, like a fourth density planet, like a base, and fifth dimensional, like noospheric dimension. Which would be more or less easeful in wellness if we were coming to the ends of our third density planet, which, as it were, we are in its expression, and at the extent and fullness of our fourth dimension as an expression of our multidimensionality. But we're not, right? Like we're coming into like the orchestra as a collective, horribly undertrained. And like from a really dysfunctional place, because it's not even like our planet's coming from the edge of third density potentiality, but truly from some fucked up place away from it by virtue of the abuse that has been kind of entombed, like directly towards it. And instead of being the extent of the fourth dimensional kind of expression as like individuated consciousness or like noospheric consciousness, the mass majority of the people on this planet, consciousness representation, is closest to second dimension, not the end of fourth, but the beginning of third. Hence this shitty music. But the great thing about being a musician is there's no such thing as shitty music. You should make your own. I've been closing for our like lovely time together. Thanks for spending it with me. That last little like third house Jupiterian Judgement Aquarian perspective has been at once enveloping and unfolding for you. I share because I love. And I love because I can't not. It's true. there is no existence or non-existence in which I don't love you. And that's not, okay, it's not separate from my being and my not being. And that's true for everyone. And only hard to find for the fun of it. Thanks, Kay. Thank you. I love you. And I can't wait to high five hug you. Namaste. Namago. Bad yoga joke. But it's funny, right? Namaste. Namago. I love you. I love us. Peace.